Let's talk about vaccines for a little bit. I get a lot of questions from friends and family about my choice not to vaccinate my children, and I don't get defensive. There's really no need to get defensive. In fact, the only people I've seen really get defensive is the people who do vaccinate their children. And a lot of times that's because they don't feel like they have enough information to really defend their choice, and so a lot of times that's where the defense comes. I feel really good about my choice, feel very confident in my decision not to vaccinate my children, and I've done the research on both sides. I've looked at both sides of the argument in great detail. I've watched a lot of documentaries on both sides, and I've actually spoken with a lot of medical professionals. My decision to research this a little bit more came from when I worked at a children's hospital, and I worked on the hematology and the oncology unit. And every flu season, the nurses and doctors would come around and they would offer you, the nurses would come around and offer you the flu vaccine. The doctors were always kind of doing this number at me, like, don't do it. And it got me thinking, why is this, something that we push if even the doctors are advising that against this, right? Because our vaccinations are a little bit outdated. A lot of the diseases, in fact, all of the diseases that we vaccinate for, are not things that we should really be afraid of anymore. They're things that our bodies have natural immunity against because we have stronger immune systems. We also have healthier sewage systems and better hygiene in our restaurants and things like that. We have healthier water, better filtration, and that's how a lot of these diseases were spread back in the day. So it's a little outdated that we're even worried about these diseases anymore. In fact, leprosy is something that you really only hear about in biblical times, but in fact there's 200 cases of leprosy every year in the US alone, and it's not something that we discuss, that we're scared of, because it doesn't feel next door, it doesn't feel close to home, and it's probably because it's not something that we vaccinate for. Therefore, you don't really hear a lot about it. Also, even though the things that we vaccinate for are still, the child still could catch it and still be exposed to, there are things that our body can fight against naturally. A lot of those diseases can be fought with high doses of vitamin A or high doses of vitamin C, or simply rest, time. A lot of people can get over the measles just with time. And in fact, you probably know someone in your family that had the measles when they were young. And I know that I had the chickenpox when I was young because there wasn't a chickenpox vaccine. And that's something that our bodies get over. We hear the horror stories in the news about people, especially children, that are dying from these diseases. But that is a very, very, very small percentage. And when you look at the numbers of the people who are not only catching the diseases, but an even smaller number of the people that are dying from the diseases, and then you compare those to the numbers of the people who are being vaccinated and suffering a vaccine injury, to me, it was a no-brainer just to take the risk, avoid the vaccine, because even though vaccine injuries, the major topic is that they cause autism, and I don't really believe in that. I think autism is caused by a lot of things. Some of it can be genetic, it can be chemicals in the air or in the body, neurodeficiencies and things like that. There's a lot of other causes, environmental causes and genetic causes. Vaccines can also be a part of that because of the metals and the things that are in vaccines and the preservatives. But a vaccine injury could be something like facial paralysis, frequent ear infections, food allergies, a suppressed immune system, a lot of neurological disorders, endocrine dysfunction. There's a lot of things that are linked directly to poor eyesight. They're linked directly to vaccine, even a weakened gait or a sensory integration disorder. There are so many things that people say, my child did not have this until they got this vaccine. Vaccine companies are being sued over $12 billion in suits from families just like you and me, that the moment they got the vaccine, they saw seizures, they saw food allergies, they saw poor eyesight, poor gait, loss of regular developmental milestones that the child had reached previously. Some of them are mild, some of them are severe. And as a mother, I just thought, I can't do that. I can't push this product into my child that is made with ingredients that I would never expose them to by mouth, let alone put directly into their bloodstream, as sort of an insurance policy, just in case they get exposed to this thing, just in case their system isn't strong enough. I prefer to trust their natural immune system and feed them things like garlic and elderberry and onion and mushroom and things like that. Herbs and plants that are designed to strengthen our body's natural immunity and fight off these diseases should we be exposed. And of course, if they were to catch something, I would immediately take them into the hospital and get them treated for that. But in my opinion, getting treated for the disease and having a lifelong immunity to it is much better for my child than risking their neurological or their neurological systems or their overall health with an insurance policy, which is a vaccine. And so I feel very strongly with my decision. It is difficult sometimes to fight with the bullying. A lot of doctors now and other mothers are sometimes the worst about bullying against vaccines, but you just have to be prepared to deal with that and be prepared to fight your case. But it is very difficult to argue with a doctor. They are not going to back down. They're paid hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to advocate for vaccines, and they could lose their license for letting it known that they don't really agree with the process. If they're not advocating for vaccines and not at least offering them to families, it's kind of a risky business for them. So you're not really going to win an argument. There's no point in discussing it. When I get vaccine bullied by a doctor, I just say, I've done the research on both sides. I'm happy with my choice. This is not a discussion I'm willing to engage with you. And I'm very firm on that decision. And I usually cut them off as soon as they start talking. I'm not going to discuss this with you. And once they see that this is about to get real rough and real tough very fast, I am not going to budge. I'm intelligent. I have researched the sides. They usually will give in. And I change doctors a lot of times if I feel that they're bullied. I've done my research and found a homeopathic doctor, a naturopath that take care of my children. Every time I go in, she has to say, are you still not vaccinating? And I say yes, and then we move on with our day. The only time I really deal with bullying now is like in the ER or something like that, or maybe at the playground if somebody brings up the topic and asks a question. But more often than not, I just find it's better not to say anything to people about it. I have had a couple of friends that decide they don't want their children to play with my children because mine are unvaccinated, which is very hurtful. But again, my child's health is the utmost priority to me. And if you have if your child's health obviously is a priority to you, and if you don't feel that our children can play together, then that's your choice. Then you can move along, because I'm not going to risk my child's health just so that my child can play with yours. And I'm very firm on that. I've never really allowed it to hurt my feelings. It's a personal choice. And when we become mothers, our children become our first priority, and we have to continue doing what we think is best for them, for sure. And there's also a common myth, or I guess a belief, that an unvaccinated child is a risk to the vaccinated children, but in fact is the opposite. The vaccinated children are much more of a risk to the unvaccinated children like mine because of shedding. So a freshly vaccinated child who has a live virus in their body, or even a little hint of the virus, is shedding that, and it can actually expose an unvaccinated child to that. Again, I've never really been scared of this. I feel like even if my child does get a slight hint of that disease, it's building their immunity and building their system naturally. I have never bleached my home. I don't stop them from eating off of the floor. I allow them to play in dirt. They were playing in creeks and drinking out of creeks, which was disgusting when they were babies, and they've never really gotten sick, and it's never been a threat to their health. In fact, I feel like it's strengthened their immune system overall. So I feel good about my decision. However, if you want to do research on your own, there are plenty of great blogs and resources out there to do the research on your own. I would also suggest watching the documentary called Vaxxed, VAXXED, which is a really great resource for me as well. And no matter what you decide to do, it has to be what's best for you and your family, and not the influence of anybody else, especially our government and pharmaceutical companies. They don't have your child's interest at heart. They don't know your child, they don't know you, and there's not been enough studies to show that vaccines are still relevant to our modern day society and our current state of health as human beings. You can follow me on joinwholeheart.com.